It's 12 minutes past 9. Let's go straight now to our top story. Now, South Africa's criminal justice system is under unprecedented scrutiny. The Madlanga Commission of Inquiry is hearing claims of political interference, corruption, and criminal syndicates being shielded within law enforcement, with KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi warning of a looming total collapse. This comes just days after the Interpol summit in Cape Town, where South Africa presented itself as a continental hub for regional safety and cross-border policing. But can a system facing collapse, as Mkhwanazi says, at home still anchor stability across the region? To help us unpack the legal and institutional stakes, we're joined now by legal expert Mpumelelo Zikalala of Zikalala Attorneys. A very good evening to you, Mr. Zikalala, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening to you, and good evening to your viewers.
So obviously today, much anticipated, and the fact that the first day of testimony started with Mkhwanazi himself. What were your thoughts so far, and what do they reveal about the independence or even fragility of South Africa's criminal justice system?
Well, it basically means that the oversight tools that we have or ought to have employed to make sure that these type of problems do not arise are simply not working. Or maybe at a later stage it will then be apparent as to what are the inefficiencies. Is it a system that is inefficient, or is it the individuals that are using the system that are inefficient? But what I think what General Mkhwanazi is saying to us, you have a system that ought to be working but which is not doing its job. What can you do in order to be able to augment that? Secondly, which is the most important question and maybe submission according to me, it's how the Constitution is crafted and the duties or the powers that have been given to the minister. Someone who's not a career politician, who's just a political appointee, being given various powers in order to augment and play a very crucial role when it comes to policy and even daily operations of what the police should do. That is simply something that ought to have not have taken place, and something that needs to change as soon as possible if we want to protect the independence of our security services.
And that's something that did come up during or within Parliament and various political parties, and indeed in public discourse, when President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the steps that would ensure, as he said, an investigation that would be devoid of any interference or being polluted, by saying that the police minister, Senzo Mchunu, has decided to step aside, take a break. And questions were asked about his appointment of another minister, what exactly his legal status is. So is that also, as you talk about the constitutional considerations, is this part and parcel of the total collapse that Mkhwanazi is speaking about? Is there a real risk in law and practice?
I would say yes, even though, because now we're only dealing with one witness that has stated the evidence. There are still a number of witnesses which are going to come. And there must be a much deeper investigation in terms of saying, let's look at what is wrong and identify what the problem is. Is the problem the legislation that we're utilizing? If we say yes, then is it the Constitution, South African Police Service Act, or any other act which is applicable? And let's find ways in terms of changing those things and making sure that we're able to augment it. Now, if we take again a step back and say, what did the president have to do in order to solve this particular issue? I would humbly say a commission of inquiry was not something that we needed to do, because if we go down that route, you are going to create terms of references which are too wide and a budget which is too big. If we look at all the commissions that were taking place in the past 10 years, for example, and you say to them, please show me at least 5 tangible things that you've been able to find from those commissions, it's going to be very difficult in order for us to do that. Now, what was needed here was a situation in which General, because he's the one that ignited the whole process, will be able to come to a particular committee and share his views. Parliament ought to have been in that particular forum, but unfortunately did not provide the space in which was required for him. Secondly, the alternative one would be President created a committee of some sort, because you need to be advised, which is going to look at these allegations before you look at the broader spectrum. Yes, it would be nice to know what is happening within the metros. It would be nice to know whether someone is interfering with the SAPS, the security agency. But if you extend the scope to that such extent, you're going to make it very difficult for the commission to start and end within the time frame that has been given and within the budget that has been there, thus making it inefficient in doing what it needs to do. So it it's one of those processes where maybe a different way of doing things ought to have been adopted, and the starting point being, with the tools that we have at our disposals, are they working correctly, or do they need to be augmented here and there?
As you speak about those unchecked powers, let's go to what really has been at the heart of this matter, and that is the disbanding of the political killings task team. So, beyond the minister, is this indicative of a wider system-wide capture, rather? And we saw the State Capture Commission and its outcomes, but the continued criticism of the lack of legal remedies to those recommendations that were made by the State Capture Commission. So is this really a continuation of, again, I use the term collapse, which Mkhwanazi has, and you can correct me if it's perhaps alarmist, of South Africa's governance architecture, its illegal instruments as well?
I think you can't use the word collapse to the extent that the independence of the system itself will rely on the people that are utilizing it now, not on what has actually happened, but what we as members of the public are perceived to know. Now, if you are going to be told that a certain police minister is in cahoots or is communicating with alleged criminals, then one would tend to wonder, what are they talking about? Can anyone be able to communicate with the minister, or is it an exclusive manner in which things are being done? With that being said, then why is the minister taking decisions that are operational in nature? What informed those decisions? Because he also needs to come and account to those. You may find that he may have a valid explanation as to why, but at the end of the day, there needs to be that particular level of accountability. Now, I wouldn't maybe go to the extent of calling it a total collapse, but it is an inefficiency or a deficiency that ought to not to have been there. It is something that needs to be looked at, and it must be something that must be removed with as soon as possible. The second layer to that is the level of accountability, which then says, if it wasn't for Gerald Mkhwanazi coming out, it then means these type of inefficiencies and deficiencies would not have been found. So what can you do, or what must be created so that you are able to put these measures so that the system is self-cleansing and self-critiquing itself? Because at the end of the day, the justice system needs to be working optimally in every country. That's the element of justice. So you can't stay in a country where criminals are going to run rampant. Basically, they're going to be kings and queens and be able to do whatever that they want. And those that are in power do not find innovative ways in order to be able to deal with that. So it's one of those things that must be considered, but those are the important question in which the commission must be able to look at beyond on hearing the evidence. Yes, it may assist the commission in terms of hearing the nitty-gritties, but because they're only there to make recommendations, the NPA, SAPS, IPIT is there to do further things that can take these matters to court. Concentrate on the policy issues that need to change so that you're able to achieve the goals in which you've set out in the Constitution.
So beyond the policy issues, I want to talk about process and procedure. If we saw over 120 sensitive dockets being stripped from investigation, what does it mean then about not only adherence, but measures in place about safeguarding evidence in especially politically charged cases?
That's the type of inefficiency that you must then refer to, and then say, Minister, do you understand the implications of closing one task team and what the implications are for the victims? And when we say 120 cases, it's not cases. It's in the background, human beings, victims that need answers from the justice system that have not received that element of justice, or any whims of it in terms of their matters being concluded within the shortest reasonable amount of time. Another issue is this one. When you go to court, because in a criminal case, you must be able to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt from the side of the state, the quality and the quantity of the evidence is going to be impacted upon. Witnesses that would have been able to provide that evidence would come and gone. Some of them would have been departed or would pass away, going away with information which is required. Certain documentary evidence would be lost or would be tainted, or the chain in terms of the protection is also going to be in jeopardy, which again is definitely one of the things which is going to be raised by those defense attorneys, when they represent individuals, they're too involved in the hundred and some odd cases that have been referred to by General Mkhwanazi. So it's all those things to say, do you really understand the impact of what is there? But most importantly, what do you recommend we utilize in order to move away from the process and to make sure that we're able to provide the last whims of justice and making sure that we are working towards finalizing these matters as soon as possible?
Now, at that Interpol regional summit, it was an international summit rather, South Africa hosted it, and it pretty much claimed regional leadership, albeit while pointing out problems such as proliferation of illegal firearms and challenges with cross-border policing. But I'm just looking at these cases, as we mentioned, that some of it included politically exposed people and possible regional links. So I'm just wondering, how does it then highlight its credibility and ability to handle such cases and play that role if it faces the challenges that it has? I spoke about the Zondo Commission. There was Marikana. There have been many others. Firstly, how would this also reflect on the Madlanga Commission being effective? But also, what are the ramifications on the wider safety infrastructure throughout the region?
Are still there?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure if you missed the question, but did you hear it?
Yes, I did. Now, let's look at it within this particular context. Now, we've got to, in much as we criticize the processes that has been adopted, we've got to give credence in a sense that in order as a country to have a system which is able to self-critique itself, be able to look inwards and say, what are we doing wrong, is something that must be commended. There are certain countries where that cannot be done at all. So if you're going to have a regional leader that says, yes, we know that we're not perfect, but we're trying all our means to make sure that we're able to self-cleanse ourselves, it's something credit must be given in that aspect. But where credibility is going to be dented a bit is when you are now taking these cases and you are linking them to cases that have, or to individuals that are within the African continent, then the question is the way in which you deport them, you go and extract them in their countries of origin, the way in which you prosecute them is also going to be under fire. Remember, what we are doing now is we are indirectly investigating how certain cases have been handled, but the difference is that those cases are still live cases. There are still cases that are still going to go to court where evidence is going to be tested. So it must be handled with care so that we do not taint the evidence that would later require in court, thus placing in jeopardy the convictions that we would have received in the earlier stages. But from the process or the point of view of South Africa saying, we want to be a global leader in terms of crime prevention. We want to be a global leader when it comes to policing. We want to be a global leader when it comes to making sure that we're independent as much as possible. I think this would be the step in the right direction, but there are lesser and more cost-effective ways that would have been utilized to make sure that we get to that level.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Mpumelelo Zikalala of Zikalala Attorneys, just speaking to us about the first day of the Madlanga Commission and its implications for South Africa being an anchor when we talk about regional security, fighting organized crime, but also beyond that, looking at how when the criminal justice system falters, that it has ripple effects beyond our borders.